Right. We're live, Mr. Rhodes. It's nearly 1 minute to go. So if I just hang on a second till it just flashes on to 10 and then we'll start.
Absolutely.
Over to you, Mr. Rhodes.
Right. Thank you very much, Anna. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Employment Committee. Right. We'll begin with the minutes of the meeting, which we held on the 17th of September 2020. Does everybody agree that they are true and accurate record?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Questions? I've not been notified of any questions, either under item 2 or under item 3. And I've not also not been advised of any items which are urgent under item 4. Are there any declarations of interest?
No.
No. No, that's all right then. So that brings us then to item 6. Our first substantive item, the people.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt you. I suppose I should declare personal interest as a member of the pension board. I guess.
You declare whatever you like. Yes. All right. I think that's been noted. So, any others?
No.
No. Okay, we'll go to the people strategy then. Who is going to introduce that?
Good morning, Chair.
Caroline.
Yes, I'm going to produce. I'm going to talk through the report, if I may. So, in terms of this report, the purpose of presenting this report to Employment Committee this morning is to seek your approval for the implementation of a new people strategy for the County Council from 2020 to 2024. Basically, the purpose of a workforce strategy, a people strategy, is to make sure that the organisation, the council, has in place a really robust workforce plan to support the organisation in maintaining its performance and productivity in the delivery of its services. It's obviously also important to note that a really good people strategy, a really good workforce plan for any organisation also has very clear arrangements in place to support the learning and development of all of our staff, the mental health and well-being of our staff, and also of particular importance, particularly at this current moment in time, to make sure so far as possible our staff are able to achieve a good work-life balance. And all of these things are of particular importance when it comes to such things as us wanting to be an employer of choice and our recruitment and retention strategy. So in terms of the next paragraph, so in terms of paragraph 3 really summarises the background of the people strategy, and it just notes that we've actually had a people strategy in place since 2008-2009. We've always reviewed it at 3 yearly intervals, and that is to make sure that clearly it remains relevant, it remains aligned to what it is that we need to achieve as a county council, because if it did come out of line, then obviously we would have to go back and make adjustments in terms of what we would then need to do. Some of the projects in there that I've just noted in terms of what we've already delivered via the people strategy, Employment Committee will be familiar with. So you will be familiar with the attendance management project that Andrea has been leading on. And obviously we're going to hear from Andrea later on in the meeting. The work that we've done on recruitment and retention, the new annual appraisal process, and the work that we did on the council's new pay structure. So that just gives a flavour. There have been obviously a number of other projects, but I really just wanted to give you a flavour of what we have been doing over the last couple of years or so. In terms of this particular people strategy, we wanted to take a slightly different approach. And what we've done this time round is when we've developed it, we really have had the whole workforce in mind, because we most certainly didn't want it to come across as being just a a document for managers. So what we've actually done with this people strategy is to use it as an opportunity to communicate to our wider workforce our values and behaviours, the expectations we have certainly in terms of continued and sustained performance to serve our community, and again the support that we do have on offer to help our employees once again to make sure that their mental health, well-being and health and safety is quite rightly and looked after. So the strategy also includes a reference to our managers' charter, the importance of equality and inclusion, and how we work with our workers' groups and trade unions. So paragraph 6 of the report basically sets out how we've approached this people strategy. And like the current people strategy, we have chosen 3 themes so we could coordinate and present the work in a clear way. So those 3 themes are performance management, leadership and management, and workplace and culture. And within the body of the people strategy itself, under each of those themes, we have set out a number of outcomes that we would like to achieve for the council over the coming period, and then also set out some pieces of work which will be projects, so we are able to deliver on those outcomes. So underlying the strategy, as I'm sure you will probably guess, there is a very clear governance arrangement by which we can ensure that the strategy remains on course. As I mentioned earlier, it remains relevant and the work gets delivered not only to the timelines but also to the standards required. The government arrangements also build in those occasions when we need to consult, and we could be consulting with the wider workforce, we could be consulting with the trade unions, and of course there are those occasions where we need to seek agreement and approval from our CMT, our Chief Management Officers team, and also from Employment Committee as well. So what we're going to be doing, if approved, is we're going to put the strategy on the intranet. It is going to be what we term to be a live document, so we can keep it up to date. We are going to be putting in some links which will take both managers and employees to areas of what we consider to be of relevant importance and interest to everybody. And we're also going to be loading some videos. So what we're going to be asking some of our members of staff, perhaps some of our senior managers, is to do a video in terms of introducing particular areas of the strategy, not only from the council perspective, but also from their perspective. So hopefully people on looking at those videos will be able to feel more of a clear connection with the overall strategy itself. And this is something that we've actually not done before, so it is new for us. So paragraph 9 lists a number of the projects we're planning on doing over the next 12 months, and as I'm sure you will see from the report, it's quite an extensive list. Some of those projects are very much underway, and some of them are a continuation from our current strategy to make sure that there haven't been any gaps as such. So I won't obviously read through that list, but if there are any particular areas of interest, I'm more than happy to take any questions. I think as well, it's really important to note that we just didn't go into writing this strategy from a HR or L&D perspective. What we actually did was to carry out, with the assistance of our data and BI team, a very thorough evaluation of our current strategy, because what we needed to know from a wide range of stakeholders was what they thought about it, what worked well, but clearly, you know, what were the gaps from their perspective, so we could pick that up in this strategy and obviously consider what we could do about those gaps. So what we have done is that we've gone through those evaluation results, and we have base the strategy on those evaluation results, but also we have spoken to our senior leaders and managers from departmental perspectives, also to make sure that what we're proposing in the strategy, what we're proposing to be projects, really does not only support the council, but supports some of those issues that departments are currently facing with their workforce. So again, it makes it relevant on a number of levels. There's a paragraph in terms of resource implications, and really that's just to note that it is a fundamental part of our work within People Services. We couldn't do it without the support of other support services within the council, which we're very grateful for. So we do work very closely with our communications team and with our transformation unit that help us, bring all of this together, because from our perspective, it's a very fundamental and important programme of work. So that brings me on to the recommendation, Chair, which is to seek Employment Committee's approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline, for a very comprehensive introduction. Mrs. Broadley, have you got your camera turned on?
Can't see her.
I can't see you.
No.
No, but the photograph is there. I can't see the camera at the moment. I will keep.
She's online. She's online.
Something's happening. Anyway, I'll pass over that for the moment. Let me just, I think I'll call first of all Mrs. Newton, who's got her hand. Yes.
Thank you so much for this. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
yes.
fine. Thank you very much for this. I just wanted to emphasise, I wanted to speak really on the new wellbeing strategy. I think this is so very important at this particular time. In these COVID times, workers are isolated, they're working in their own home. And I think it's so important that they feel that they're part of a wider organisation and they're not just working in a little bubble. I mean, my next door neighbour works for the county council, and I know at the beginning she felt it a bit, but I think it's important that we emphasise and really put into practice and make people feel that there's an open door that they can go through and ask for help and support if they find that they're under stress or they're having problems because of social isolation. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Old.
Thank you, Chair. I have got reservations about this document. I don't find anywhere a precise evaluation of the current strategy, i.e. what were the baselines that were set 3 years ago? How far have we progressed towards the target areas? I do read comments in the foreword which says we've evaluated the impact of the previous policy strategy. Well, I don't know whether Employment Committee has seen that evaluation, and the results have helped to shape our ongoing priorities. Well, I would expect that, but overall, for me, I've got to ask myself the question, when I look at the objectives, how will we know that these objectives have actually been achieved? What is the behaviour that we expect to get as a result of this strategy? And where is it starting from? And where is the precise point where it should finish? Thank you, Chair.
Good point.
Thank you for that. Caroline, would you like to answer those questions before I move on?
Yes, of course. In terms of the current strategy, as I mentioned, Mr. Old, we did go into quite an in-depth evaluation, and we haven't brought a report back to Employment Committee in terms of those results. So if Employment Committee would like to see those results in any further detail, then of course we will be able to do that. Overall, in terms of the evaluation, I think it's fair to say that it was mixed. So over the last 3 years, areas. Certainly, if I take each of the areas, so if I take performance management, we have done a tremendous amount of work in terms of our attendance management. We haven't achieved the corporate target, but most certainly, and particularly of late, we have started to make improvements. So what we have been able to do within this strategy is to recognise that and continue with that piece of work, because clearly attendance management is vital, and particularly, as Mrs. Newton alluded to, at this particular time with staff having to work remotely, looking after their well-being, etc. We wanted to tie the two together. So I think that's one example of where we've picked up where we're currently at, and we know where we need to head towards, which is the corporate target. In terms of leadership and management, if I can take that area, if I may, we have done a lot of work with our leaders and managers, and within the people strategy, within the new people strategy, we have published a new managers charter, which we have been working on, and we put together as a consequence of not only of what we've been told under the current strategy from our managers in terms of what further advice and guidance that they wanted, but also taking into consideration ongoing conversations we've been having in our departments and with CMT about leadership and management. And one area which we are going to be focusing on in this strategy is going to be putting in place a senior executive coaching programme. And again, just going back to Mrs. Newton's point around the well-being of staff, I think it's fair to say that we are working in a completely different way. We are working in an absolutely new environment, and what we needed to make sure that our managers, our senior managers, our leaders do have both the knowledge and the confidence and the ability to work and support their staff in a different way. So that's an example of how we're taking through that work on leadership and management. And then within the new people strategy, we've got workplace and culture, which again, under that area, we're going to be developing a separate wellbeing strategy, picking up feedback in terms of how staff have been feeling from the wellbeing survey, looking at what we can put in place. And it's not just about providing a counselling service, it's also, once again, making sure our managers are coming across, they're being open, they're being accessible, and they are having conversations with their staff to make them feel fully included. One of the ways we do test all of this out is through our staff survey. And I think it's fair to say that through our staff survey, we get a really good indication of where the organisation has been and where it has moved at. And over the last couple of times, we've had a tremendous response from that staff survey. And we can see from the results the changes in how people are feeling about working for the organisation, positivity, how our values and behaviours have been embraced, but we need to do further work. So in terms of that ongoing evaluation, there's certain checkpoints that we actually adopt to get feedback, but also, again, we go back to departments, we talk to our senior leaders, we talk to DMTs to absolutely make sure that from their point of view, their workforce is in the place that they need to be in order to continue to deliver.
I'm sure you do all that, but what you haven't explained is why we don't see any visibility of that, which is the point of Mr. Old's question.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is if we bring a report to the next employment committee that sets out information in terms of the evaluation of the people strategy, and perhaps look at the staff survey results and bring the sources of information together, that would probably be very helpful.
Yeah, if you could do that. Now, the question then that arises, and I'll bring Mr. Old back in a moment, is do we approve this now or do we wait for that? You hesitate for a moment.
I did hesitate.
Gordon, you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, happy to. I absolutely take the point around kind of transparency and visibility, and I think Caroline's addressed really well what we've talked about. What we've done in terms of evaluation. I think in terms of approving, I suppose my comment would be that we want this strategy to be really dynamic. This is not a dusty sit on the shelf for the next 4 years strategy. We can make changes to it as we go. We want it to be much more of a kind of living document, and it will be supported by annual action plans. And we could bring those annual action plans to Employment Committee in the future as well, which I don't think we've done before, but we'd be happy to do that. So that provides a bit of extra kind of assurance or reassurance that we're adapting to the needs of the organisation and tuned into the direction of the organisation, then we could do that. But I would hope that you would feel able to agree today.
What would happen if we didn't?
We'd bring it back again.
Let me test the mood of the committee.
Yeah,
Mr. Rolls, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I think in essence the difference between the report in front of you and the philosophy that I'm advocating is the fact that there are no smart targets in it. So you don't know where your baseline is, and you don't know in 6 months' time where you would expect to be in a year's time and in 2 years' time. In other words, short, medium and long-term targets. And that to me makes the document woolly. I have to say that. I like what's written. I think it's a very well written document, but it doesn't enable me to know where we are at present, where we expect to be. And I suppose I'd finish by saying, I presume every senior manager has an annual appraisal, and therefore they have got very specific targets set, and they will know whether or not they're meeting those targets. And if that is the case, then presumably that ought to be part and parcel of the construction of the report.
Okay, thank you. What's the feeling for the other members of the committee? Should we ask for it to come back and perhaps with some improvements as be suggested by Mr. Old, including smart targets? What do you think, Mr. Shepherd?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I take the points that have been made very much. I'm also thinking of a way forward, because it's my view, given the current circumstances, we really need to be making all the progress we can, which is why I'm just a bit reluctant not to take some action this morning, which could get things going. Could I refer particularly to paragraph 9, Roman 3? I'm looking for that as a focus for a way forward. That seems to me to encapsulate at least two really key things. Management by outcomes, which to me means what's actually been achieved by a member of staff, which is, I would suggest, something measurable, as opposed to them, putting it rather simply, being in the building from 9 to 5. And also that links, of course, doesn't it, to the productivity. I'm trying to, just scan down this screen here. Here we are.
The third bullet point.
Yes, the productivity point. There we are. Our productivity can be increased. Now, we are told we are a very productive council. That's great. That's no reason not to aspire to be even more productive. Balanced, of course, with the importance of giving well-being support to the workforce. Now, the productivity, the performance management, the well-being, those are three, to me, critical things, all encapsulated in that bullet point, 9 Roman 3. And I'd really like us to be able to move forward on all of those. And I think that the productivity ought to be a measurable outcome. I may be advised otherwise, but I would have thought so. And again, putting it rather simplistically, achieving well-being, I think, actually also helps to achieve productivity and performance management. Yeah. So I'm going to suggest, Chairman, that we if we can, despite reservations we may hold, find a way of moving forward with these key deliverables. But I accept we may well want to have the visibility that you and Mr. Oldham referred to of the previous document. I'll pause there, Chairman, because I also go into sort of waffle woolly mode.
Oh, I know you mustn't do that. Right, could I suggest to the committee that we give provisional approval to this, ask for it to come back to us at our next meeting with a section on the outcomes from the previous strategy, and then some smart targets put against the objectives and key deliverables which are built into this one. What do you think of that, Mr. McFarlane? Could we do that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think my point, just addressing Richard's observation, was we'll carry on delivering, regardless. The work won't stop, and we've kind of had officer approval for the detailed action plans, so the work won't pause. And some of it's continued from the previous strategy anyway, and it's important that we do continue to drive it forward. So I think I had my hand up earlier. What I was going to say was, whether it's provisional approval or not, we can bring the action plan, we can bring, with smart targets, and we can bring the evaluation. So I think that loosely ties up what you're saying, Byron.
Okay. Well, Anna, have you got what I was proposing? Because I want to put that to the committee in a moment.
Yes, I have. I've noted it down.
Right, thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposition?
Yes, I will second that, Chairman. May I also add a further comment, if I may? Looking again at that paragraph 9 and my homing in on Roman 3, there are, I think, a total, is it, of eight points in that, or is it more than that? Here we are.
Yeah, there are eight
Roman numerals there, aren't there?
Yes, quite a
some
lot
of them appear to me to overlap with each other quite a bit.
They're separate points, aren't they? The others, aren't they?
Beg your pardon?
Oh, I see what you mean. They're in the body of the strategy. You mean? Yes.
I'm looking at this summary, so I'm trying to scan down my other screen.
I'm at the bottom of page 8, which is the
yes, indeed, yes.
Right.
Page 8, paragraph 9, Roman 3. In terms of Mr. Old's remark about no smart targets woolliness, the way I read para 9 with its summary there, those deliverables, Roman 3 seems to me to, as it were, encapsulate things mentioned elsewhere in the Roman numerals. To me, Roman 3 is really almost at the heart of this, and if we can work on that seems to be really important. But if I'm oversimplifying things, then somebody please tell me.
Right, well, I think we could take that on board unless someone else has a view. Any other views that you want to express before we ask the committee to approve that?
No, that's fine.
No? So has everybody agreed that's what we'll do? That we'll give provisional approval to the strategy as it stands, and then we'll take a further paper at the next meeting which will address the issues that have been raised.
Yes.
All right. That's agreed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, can we move forward then to the next one, which is, I can just find it, item 7, which is our wellbeing survey. So who are we going to?
That'll be me, Chair.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, Mark. Yes, right, got you.
Excellent. If everyone can see me on camera, hopefully,
absolutely,
as well, and hear me.
Yeah,
fabulous, excellent. So I'll talk you then through obviously the report that's in the pack, and just to kind of give I guess some of the background for this report. There was an initial wellbeing survey was done with our staff in May this year, and that kind of was included in some of the discussions of the report that we gave at the last employee employment committee about some of the actions that we're undertaking to help support staff through the lockdown. What we've since done is a second survey that we started over the summer and then finished in October, just to obviously kind of compare some of the results, check the progress, and have some evidence of the impact of some of our actions that we've put in place, and hopefully kind of just talk you through some of those results that we've got now. So in paragraph 6, kind of we can see kind of we had the response rate that we had of over 2,000 individuals, which is about a third of the total workforce that we have. Now, this was a slightly reduced rate of the first survey that we had, but it was still fairly equally distributed amongst all the different departments. So I think we still got quite a good representation and response rate in terms of the results. And if you look at paragraph 7, this is kind of our first question, which is talking about the council's response and how staff feel about how the council has responded to the coronavirus and the pandemic. And hopefully, kind of what's pleasing, I think, is some not only kind of quite high results in terms of positivity, but also kind of some slight increases in those as well. So the first question was about how staff feel informed about the council's response, and the percentage of staff who said that they felt very or fairly well informed in round 1 was 92.6, and that increased to 94.8, which is, I think, it's probably got quite a real significant and real positive percentage that we can see there. And the second question, I guess, was a bit more kind of then detailed and operational about kind of how they feel informed about kind of some of the staffing operational issues in their area. And again, so it's still fairly high, and there was an increase, as you see, going up to 87.1% there that staff kind of felt recently that they felt kind of informed and very well formed and fairly well informed about what was happening to them in their role. We then moved on to some of the top 3 concerns that we felt that staff had, and asking them kind of what were they worried about, what were their issues, how were they feeling about it. And perhaps it's important to note at this stage that obviously the survey finished before the second lockdown was announced as well. So there perhaps maybe a little bit of a health warning, perhaps some about these about the outcomes that we can see here. But in terms of the wider economy, we look in terms of worries, and that's slightly decreased, but it's still obviously kind of really high. So we see 87.3% of staff are worried about the economy. We had 78% worried about their health and safety and the well-being of their friends and their family, and then obviously kind of concerns about community and service users as well. Kind of obviously for the people and the residents that we're serving and working with. So you can still some really kind of quite high, significant worries and concerns, which perhaps is to be expected given the situation that we've kind of found ourselves in. The positive bit, I guess, is kind of you can see that some of those bits were decreasing and some of those worries reducing. If we go into section 9, which is going to about some general satisfaction levels, and I've kind of pulled out some of the key areas here, and we can see that they're kind of a bit of a mixed outcome, perhaps, in some of these bits. So in terms of wellbeing information and support available, which links, I think, to the conversation earlier, and particularly kind of the question Councillor Newton was raising about wellbeing, we can see there's been quite a high percentage, I think, in terms of satisfaction about the information provided to staff about where they can go for support. That's seen a slight increase. The support from your line manager has seen, like I said, about a slight dip by 0.7%, but kind of still relatively high, kind of at 82. The tools and equipment available to do the job, and this is one of our key actions from last time, was about the IT and making sure that people had the kit and the ability to work from home or whatever situation they found themselves in. You see that's seen a good increase up to 75% of staff who are satisfied with the tools and equipment they've got. Another kind of increase is about the connection to the county council network, obviously to that IT, so that again that links in with the tools and ability to do their jobs. Still 58%, and we think some of that might be related to individuals' home broadband connection and those issues, but we kind of we can see an increase there. The one we're going to see a bit of a decrease here is about feeling connection, I think, with social contacts, and perhaps understandably this is one of the bits where we can see is a difficulty with people working in isolation, is how they kind of have that team connection and how they kind of have that bit of we talked about social connection, but I guess it's that teamwork and how you talk to your colleagues and get on with your colleagues and work together, and understandably you can see that that's taken a bit of a dip. But the bit that has it, and lastly, I guess the bit that has a little bit of increase again, is about a schedule that works for work-life balance as well. And I think kind of obviously over the summer, there were lots of our staff were dealing with childcare issues at the same time, and kind of dealing with obviously kind of lots of different work pressures coming in at different times. So the fact that that's kind of gone up to quite a healthy number of 74% is probably quite positive as well. So having seen, I guess, some of the positive outcomes, some of the actions that we took in place last time, we've refined, I guess, some of the actions that we want to take next and further look at them and kind of see actually is there some areas where we still need to continue providing that support and continue providing staff with the ability and the tools to do their job. And there's a list there, as you see, kind of 10 things that we are going to kind of focus on to begin with. And that is, I won't go through them all, but things such as kind of making sure, I guess, the level of support for new starters who've come in. So we've had to recruit and induct a number of new people into the council in a remote way, and obviously it's key for them who perhaps may not have some of that network with their colleagues and how they can develop those bits. Encouraging still that flexible hours and those working hours, but obviously kind of where it's appropriate. And where it's possible to do that. Some of the kind of the rollout of Microsoft Teams, like we're using today, and making sure that staff have got the skills and ability to use them and the confidence to use those bits. And things about kind of the well-being strategy, which kind of was touched upon earlier in the conversation about the people strategy, about kind of making sure that people kind of focused on the 4 areas that we've decided on, which is things like stress management, depression, anxiety, and bereavement as well. So I think it's kind of important to say, kind of in summary, obviously, that well-being will continue to be a key focus for the council. It is one which does link in with productivity. It does link in with sickness absence. It links in with recruitment. It links in with retention. It links in with all the things that we want from our staff. And kind of asking the committee just to note the outcome of that report and kind of some of the future steps that kind of outline there. And happy to take any questions on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. That's a very good introduction. What this report seems to be, to me, to be telling us is really quite a lot of information about the way we will transition, probably to quite radical new ways of working in the future compared with what we had a year ago. I mean, some of it we've already done, of course, but there's some further development to happen. An example of that probably would be the development of the use of Teams, where I think we still have a little bit more to learn on the use of that. And indeed, our IT is a little bit of a problem there because some people haven't got the quality broadband that's needed for it to stand up all the time, including the leader of the county council who had trouble with it yesterday at the council meeting. So it can affect almost anyone. So clearly there are issues arising from that, and that's broader issues, by the way, for the county council. But of course, there's another thing which is indicated, which I got from this report, was that people have adjusted very quickly to this new things, and in fact, and indeed very well. I mean, initially, I think they were very uncomfortable with things, but then they adjusted their lifestyles and rode in with it, despite the fact of the fear of getting coronavirus, which would have obviously for individuals would have been and families would have been quite devastating. Most, of course, haven't got it because though it's affected less than 1% of the population, but it has affected all our ways of working and ways of living too. But we are moving in the right direction, so I think this is good, and we've got to keep this survey going, because we're going to have to change some of our policies, aren't we, in the future? Not least of which is going to be the question of how we manage productivity, which was mentioned in the last paper, I think. So I find this quite a valuable indication. And in many ways, it's perhaps confirming what I thought was happening, which I'm comforted by the way. So thank you very much for that, and presumably you will continue to do surveys to see how it evolves.
We will, Chair. Yeah, I think we need to think of the timing of the next one to make sure we're not surveying people out all the time and and ensuring we got time.
Yeah.
The time for the action to take place as well, but yeah, it will be part of our work going forwards. Yes.
Indeed. Now I have Mrs. Broadley first, I think. If you'd like to unmute.
Yes, I have to manage it. It's quite good that you're talking about getting used to technology because I'm still working my way through it, not very successfully sometimes. Excellent report. I think the well-being of staff is a priority for the county council. The one thing you said had a side dip was people feeling a connection to their team. And then you went on to talk about these sort of Teams meetings. And I know that in some departments, they don't have the technology. I'm thinking more of adults and communities. They don't have the technology. They don't use it every day. Do you have a system in place whereby they can have team meetings? Normally they would have a regular staff meeting. If they were in a building, even home care, they go in every so often and they have. So is that something that is available for staff so that they've still got that connection with their colleagues? Thank you.
Yeah, it's there's a difficult balance, I think. Yeah, the different services are doing many different things, and home care, which is one of the departments that I work with, which is adults and communities, they've tried to work quite hard on that, and as you can imagine, they've got quite a wide range and disparate staff who are all about the county doing their different duties, and they've had a number of different processes, I think, for a while in order to try and build that team development and try and have that kind of that team bonding and communication and support out to staff, and they're still kind of looking at different ways of how they can do that to make sure it works, I guess. And so it's not the system they have in place doesn't work, but to make sure it's still kind of does what it is that it needs to do, particularly at these current times. So they've had a number of different areas. They've recently they've had a number of different meetings kind of through Teams. So Teams they've tried that kind of within home care, and it seems to have been fairly successful because people can access it on the home computer, so they don't need to kind of go through this. They can access it through a web link, and people have dialed in on their phones as well. So some of it is kind of tied in with some of the kit that they've got and the provisions that they've got. So there's numerous kind of different approaches, I guess, and so numerous different ways of doing it. There isn't one set answer to do it and for one single occupation across the whole of the council. The key thing, I think, for managers is to have the ability and the knowledge and the confidence to try different ways and different ways of approaching things and do the way that works for them and works for their staff. And I think that we've seen that, and I think the results of the survey hopefully kind of show that as well, particularly kind of through that summer where I guess, that communication was key with staff and making sure they knew what was happening. We can see those high levels of satisfaction are still there. So I think kind of and going forward, again, one of the things we'll be doing is looking at things such as team development as well. So actually, what can we do to help bring those teams together in many different ways, because there's lots of things that have been lost, I guess, that social aspect as I talked about in the report. What can we do to help develop that, bring that back in within the constraints of the situation that we find ourselves in? So numerous different challenges, and I think because of that there's numerous different answers and different kind of approaches that departments are finding, and I'm pleased to say I think the majority of those have been successful, but there will continually be a challenge and we'll continually try and kind of adapt to the world in which they find themselves in.
Okay, thank you for that. Are you happy with that, Mrs. Broadley?
Yeah, yes, very happy, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Newton.
Thank you very much. You've more or less answered some of what I was going to ask, but my question really is around social isolation, because many of the workers they don't often see other people, and I wonder whether or not we could introduce something like a buddy scheme where they could have another worker may not even be doing a similar job, but just someone that they can connect to very quickly so that they don't feel so isolated in their role. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll ask Mark to come back in a moment. I'll take Mr. Old first, though.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it was an excellent report, and I think that Betty Newton's comments in the previous paper just repeated, and also Mrs. Broadley's comments are ones that I would want to support. I'm thinking specifically of a newly appointed children's social care worker who maybe has just qualified from university, would normally be assigned to a team with all the informal support, ad hoc, almost daily supervision from the team manager. I do hope that we've got the systems strong enough to make sure that person doesn't feel isolated, goes out and makes a mistake, which then ends up at a later stage with reputational damage to the county council, because it does strike me that this is a particularly critical area. We know domestic violence has increased. We know that referrals of children have increased, and getting it right. And I think you're work is excellent. I couldn't praise it enough. It's just my own anxiety, having been for a number of years in that area, of thinking that we've got to get it right for those newly appointed people, because we do rely on a lot of people coming out from university, coming into their first job. So that would be the plea that I would make, Chairman. Good report.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mark, just to finish it off.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I guess both of those kind of issues, but are really prevalent and really kind of important. And we may have a situation where we've got an individual who's a new starter and is socially isolated at the same time as well, and kind of we have the combination of both of those issues. And I hear kind of anecdotally, I guess, from individuals who, particularly for new starters, we have continual checks in with them. The managers do, and I hear from new starters from our own team, for example, because it's important we get it right for ourselves. Of those continue making sure they've got the equipment to do it, the skills and the abilities, but knowing who to talk to. And I think that probably kind of picks up on Councillor Newton's question a little bit earlier about who to talk to, because particularly as a new starter may not have those that team knowledge of who or team friendship and bonds that they've already made. So how they actually kind of reach out and know who to talk to, how's the best way of talking to them. Sometimes a lot of new starters don't want to disturb people. They kind of feel, I don't want to bother you with my issues and queries. So it comes back to the culture and the atmosphere and the approach that we have to take through the council, and the approach that managers have to take is one of welcoming, it's one of openness, and it's one of making sure that that our new starters and those who are isolated have the support, they know where to go to, know where to turn to, know who to talk to, and they kind of have all that kind of that network, I guess, constructed around them, which maybe they wouldn't have been able to construct if they'd actually been in a building sometimes.
Okay, thank you for that. Gordon, I was going to say that was going to be the last one, but you wanted to come in again.
Sorry, I'm not desperate for the last word. It was just one brief point of hopefully reassurance that as we look at the long term, so beyond COVID, we're as some members will be aware, we're looking at how we use buildings in the future. So, for example, we're trying to work through how we create collaboration spaces so that people who need to come in, teams that need to come together for a whole range of reasons, can do that. During COVID, it's doing it safely, and then long term continuing to do that. So whilst we'll have a flexible model of working, we'll make sure that people and teams come together when they need to. Mark's answered the point around new starters. It's absolutely vital. Completely agree with Ivan on that. Okay.
Well, thank you all for that. Is everybody happy that we note the paper?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Thank you very much. We'll move on. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Right. Move on to item 8. And Andrea. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the last attendance management report that we had looked at the absence position at the end of June. This report looks at absence at the end of September. The table that is on page 31, I hope that you will be pleased to see that the majority of the figures are in a more positive position. And since the September position, we've had some October figures which are also headed in a more positive direction as well. I think across the board, the majority of departments have had improvements, and particularly at that LCC level, we've continued to make improvements. Obviously, we need to make progress towards that 7.5 target. We have some departments that are there, but not all. So we are not there yet, but we are making progress towards that. And as I go through the report, I will start to dig into the trends that have changed during the last period, because we talked about that at the last meeting. If I move forward, reasons for absence, I've given a breakdown of our top 10 of our most common reasons for absence. As you'll see, stress, mental health, depression continues to be the reason that we lose most of our time to absence. It's still our highest. Musculoskeletal has started to come down. Cancer, we've started to see that as a greater percentage of our time lost, and it's continued. And as I say, I will start to talk about the trends in the next section. COVID-19, this is the first time this has dropped into the top 10. Previously, it was at a lower percentage. It didn't make the top 10. I have started to notice that our not disclosed absence has started to creep up, and that's going to be something that I'm going to start to address with departments through business partner colleagues to see where we are failing to capture that information, because obviously without that information we aren't targeting our actions in the right places. So that will be something that I will be looking to improve by the time I come back to the next committee. If I move on to the changing trends, what we discussed at the last committee has really continued. So I talked about the table at the bottom of page 32. Onto the next page, I explain what that shows, and it's really what I explained before, which is during the pandemic period, so really since late March, we've had instances of back and neck and musculoskeletal and gastric illnesses have been half those reported last year, same period last year. And we've also seen some reductions in viral and cough, cold, flu sickness compared to the same period last year. It is possible to speculate, obviously hard for me to prove scientifically, but to speculate that that could be down to the lockdown, social distancing. We know that during those periods, people didn't come into physical contact with each other as much in work, but also just generally within the community. And that may well have stopped germs spreading. And also there may be an element of people that were able to, those professions that were able to work from home, they may have been able to continue working with milder symptoms, whereas maybe in previous years they may have taken sick leave. So again, I am speculating, but those are things that could be down to. It's possible that lockdown, together with temporary closure of services or service reductions, could have led to individuals having less opportunity to have accidents, or maybe opportunity to rest pre-existing conditions, which could have led to that back and neck and musculoskeletal change in absence. That is still difficult for me to understand. The musculoskeletal is significantly lower than last year and is not completely explainable. Moving on, time lost due to stress, mental health, depression, absence is lower than the same period last year. It's an indicator that some of the work that we've been doing about well-being, that my colleagues have been talking about this morning, has been making an impact. It's hard to know what the absence figures would have been like without that intervention. Obviously, we know that this is a priority. It's within our strategy. We continue to monitor it and prioritise this with our workforce. Obviously, the amount of absence that people take due to well-being is only one indicator. We know that not everybody who has issues with their mental health takes time off from work, but it is something we continue to monitor. We spoke last time about members of our staff who'd unfortunately had a diagnosis of cancer, and we were particularly concerned about news reports around the NHS having difficulties in delivering cancer treatment during this particular period. We've seen within the absence figures that it's been a similar amount of time lost due to cancer as last year, which is a positive thing in one way, that it's not higher. What we have done is, with our performance management team, who are our targeted absence team, is that we've prioritised any diagnosis of cancer treatment to make sure that we've got an advisor speaking to a manager as soon as we become aware of that, to make sure that we're giving as much support as we have within our gift to those individuals, to make sure that we're giving them as much wellbeing support and that we've got a appropriate support plan for those individuals. All the cases that I'm aware of, everybody is getting really good treatment, and we haven't had anybody that I'm aware of that is on a waiting list for treatment, which is very positive. We continue to monitor the trends. Obviously, as they say, we're not out of the woods yet. This continues on. We've only just come out of lockdown. We're into tier 3. The trends will change as the vaccine takes hopefully effect within our community. People will start to work differently. They'll start to interact in the community differently. People's will have illnesses, injuries, and their absence will become different, is my expectation. I'll continue to monitor and I will continue to report to you. We will continue to manage absence in the robust way that we have done. I think obviously Caroline talked about the evaluation that we had completed as part of the people strategy. One of the very positive things for me that came out of that work was that we have developed a really positive performance management culture around attendance within the organisation, and that gives me real confidence, and we can see that with our managers, that they know their responsibilities and that they have a lot of confidence and skill with carrying out this work. So we continue. I'm really positive that we'll be able to continue to make inroads. Within the report, I've detailed the long and short term absence split. It's very similar to previous reports, with the majority of our absence being around long term absence, time lost. And then onto the last section, I've detailed the service level data. I think one of the areas that maybe stands out is on page 35. Promoting independence had gone up in this period, as had personal care and support. If I just explain what those areas include. So promoting independence is where home care heart sits, and personal care and support is the direct adult social care services, so community opportunities, day centres, shared lives, short breaks, those areas. So those have been your frontline adult social care services that have been obviously working out in the community all through this period. Both areas have started to see a drop in the last few weeks in their absence. They are actively managing their attendance, so I don't have any concerns, and obviously Mark is the business partner for that area and we've been in regular contact about absence management. And if there are any questions about the report, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. It's interesting that it takes a virus and a pandemic to improve the figures a bit.
Yes.
Which is rather surprising, really, but nevertheless it's welcome that the figures have improved. Underlying it, I think you've hinted at this in your commentary, Andrea, that there may be some concealed illness, of course, as we've heard elsewhere and amongst the population in general. And of course, I don't suppose you've got any evidence to prove that either one way or the other. But no, that will come out, and the NHS will eventually get on top of all that. But anyway, whatever's happening, it's certainly a slight improvement, and it's taken a long time to get it. So that's very welcome. Now I've got Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you, Chairman. Just check on a point of detail. It's on page 31, paragraph 3.
Yes.
The far right-hand column about total cost. I noticed that the ESPO and EMMS figures are exactly the same. Is that that's an interesting coincidence?
Those were the figures that I was provided by the finance team. Yes.
Right.
I did double check those figures.
Yes, well, thank you, because it's the coincidence, doesn't it? Strikes one. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, to the pound, in fact.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it might be worthwhile asking the question again of finance.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right, I
Thank
can't
you.
see anyone else who wants to comment. Are we happy to? I think we were just invited to note that report.
Yes.
And,
That's right.
I'm happy to do that, everybody. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's fine.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which now brings us to item 9, which is the government proposals to reform local government exit pay. Now, is that you, Gordon?
Yeah, I've got the dubious pleasure of this one.
I thought yes.
Yeah, it's not a long report. So the government have been looking at for quite a long time, sort of 4 or 5 years, at doing something with exit pay. It kind of started a number of years ago, and the intention, we thought at that time, was aimed at senior managers and limiting exit packages. And the figure that we're looking to limit it to was 95,000. That was eventually legislated for in the Small Business Enterprise and Employment Act in 2015, but never implemented. And it's taken till further consultation last year, and then regulations laid this year for that to be implemented. And it has been implemented. The 95,000 cap, which I'll come to in more detail, was implemented on the 4th of November, so just newly implemented. So what MHCLG then did, and I think each government department who have some responsibility for areas of the public sector were asked to look at further changes. Just jumping to the bottom of paragraph 3, no other parts of the public sector apart from local government have any live proposals. There's been a number of judicial reviews, and I'll come back to that, which appear to have stopped any other proposed implementations. But MHCLG undertook a further consultation exercise, which ran until the 9th of November, and that proposed a range of further measures, much more far-reaching than the original proposal of 95,000 cap. It also covered the required changes to the pension regulations to allow pension funds to implement any changes as opposed to what they have to do now. It's probably worth saying that a number of professional associations, Solace, Alice, and I think local government lawyers, if that's the right name for them, have engaged a lawyer, and there is a judicial review pending. But for the moment, we have to assume that these will be implemented following, the end of consultation. So we just need to keep an eye on that. I think it's worth saying that the second phase of the exit regulations, as proposed, will have a significant impact on staff aged over 50 or 55 and over in the pension scheme who leave through either compulsory or voluntary redundancy or via settlement agreement, which are a normal 3 routes for people leaving and accessing pension. And actually that will go down as far as grade 10, and I'll come to why in a second. So phase 1 of the changes, as I said, brought in on the 4th of November, and exit payments have been capped at 95,000. That calculation of redundancy and pension includes the pension strain. So that's not something that the scheme member receives. It's the cost to the council of topping up the pension. So, for example, if somebody leaves on compulsory redundancy, they're entitled to full pension, but that will be capped using the cost of the actuarial strain. And that's a core part of the potential judicial review challenge. So, so paragraph 6, we haven't yet got the associated changes to the local government pension scheme, but there is initial guidance on how pension funds can effectively implement the 95,000 cap. So if I jump to paragraphs 7 to 11, these are the further proposals that were consulted on that haven't yet been implemented. And just very briefly, they've put a maximum tariff, or they're proposing maximum tariff for calculating exit payments of 3 weeks pay per year of service. That doesn't impact us because our current scheme caps the number of weeks at 30, and I would think the majority of authorities, with some exceptions, are at a 30-week maximum at the moment. The second point in paragraph 8, regardless of salary level, a maximum salary of 80,000 will be used on which to calculate redundancy or a redundancy compensation payment, and that will be reviewed annually, but they're capping that at 80. So anybody paid over 80,000, the redundancy will be calculated on an assumed salary of 80. The paragraph 9. So if there are pension strain costs, so if a member is leaving and they're going to access their pension and they're accessing it early, and there are costs, actuarial strain costs, then instead of being based on actual weekly pay, which is the council's current policy, the associated redundancy payment is going to be capped at the statutory redundancy level. So that's currently £538 a week. So if there are pension strain costs, automatically someone will get statutory redundancy instead of redundancy based on actual pay. And that's the element that will affect anybody from grade 10 upwards. So you can start to see that this is far more, it's much more far-reaching and going way beyond the original intent or the target of senior managers in the original proposals. And just for reference, grade 10 would be a level 2 social worker, for example. Then, as a further twist, in paragraph 10, the government's proposing that in every case where there is pension strain, the value, so the amount of statutory redundancy, the calculation, is then deducted from the pension strain. In other words, the member won't receive a full pension, they'll receive a reduced pension. So current policy, member gets compulsory redundant, gets a full pension and redundancy based on actual pay. And you can start to see, you probably need a flow chart to explain it more clearly, you can start to see that these proposals are hitting people in a number of different ways. The government have also proposed some element of flexibility to mitigate that based on individual circumstances. So the member could make up a reduction in strain costs from their own resources, so they could pay into it. We're waiting to find out how that would happen in practice and what the tax implications would be. And another proposal, which again doesn't happen now, because if somebody's made compulsory redundant, they have to have their pension, is to allow them to defer their pension. And if they're not taking their pension, they could then benefit from the unreduced redundancy payment. And then the final bit of flexibility is that somebody could choose to leave on a reduced pension, so not a full pension, so no pension strain cost, and then they would get the redundancy payment based on our current policy. That's a really, I can't make it any simpler. It's a really complicated set of proposals that will hit individual scheme members in any number of ways. The pension funds up and down the country have been engaging their actuaries. We've engaged Hymans, the pension fund have, to try and work through how this will work in practice, even when it comes in. So the final bit I'd say is that authorities and pension funds were invited to feedback during consultation period. The County Council did that, the pension fund did that. From a more technical perspective, it was interesting the way that the questions were worded in the consultation document, because rather than consultation that you would expect, which is, have we got this right? Should we be doing this? It was more about, it was worded in a way where I think you would read and say, this is going to happen, but please tell us where you think there's any disproportionate impact and whether we should put transitional arrangements in place. So that was the tone of the consultation. We haven't yet got a date for implementation. I think there are some assumptions being made that it may be January, with transitional arrangements covering leavers up to the end of June, but we haven't had that confirmed yet. And the pension fund is working with colleagues, working with the LGA, etc., on what this means in practice with the guidance that we have. So sorry, that's been a bit complicated and a bit messy. The report's for noting, because there's no action that we can take, and we're just waiting for this second change to happen, and or any judicial review that takes place. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. I'm actually very disturbed about this. As you know, I was until earlier this year the chairman of the LGA's pension committee, and so I would have, if I'd continued in that work, I would have been right in the centre of this, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
My former colleagues no doubt are. And it does disturb me very much because I think it's going beyond the original intentions. The former Secretary of State, when this was brought in, the former Prime Minister too, and Parliament, of course, may yet have something to say about it, because it's. Well, I don't think it was ever. Originally, it was all about the rather grotesque amounts of severance pay which were awarded to senior government officials when they left, running into hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it was targeted at that. But when you bring it down at 95, I think there were eyebrows raised at 95 to begin with. But then when you start to apply it to the pension fund in the way they have, and it starts to reach down right into the depths of our organisation to level 10, which is not a particularly high salary, and middle management and those sorts of areas, and then you begin to wonder whether, in fact, it may be a step too far. And then when you add to that the fact that it's only local government that's getting this, and all the rest of the government service seems to be at the moment to be left to one side and continue as they were. And one wonders what sort of compensation may be offered to one or two failed officials that have not delivered everything they should have done in the COVID crisis, and whether they will get big compensation or not. But we shall keep our eyes open for that one.
Yeah.
So I think we've made quite a good and robust response already to the consultation as a council, because I've seen that and read that carefully. And that's mentioned in the paper anyway. So I think at the moment and it's right that we should receive this information as an employment committee. So at this moment, I think what we have to do is note everything, as indeed the recommendation says. So is everybody content to do that? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you.
Now it brings us to item 10, which is quite a nice big report to talk about now. So is this the one which Amy's going to talk about?
Yes, hi there. Thank you, Chair.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to present the annual health, safety and wellbeing report for 2019-20. The report in the appendix details the Council's overall position on health and safety. The report includes a range of information on topics such as accident data, RIDDOR reportable incidents, health and safety audits, training statistics and wellbeing data, and a range of other information as well. I'll just pick out a couple of the highlights in the report and talk through some of those. So in terms of accident data, the main highlight for the year is that the number of RIDDOR reportable incidents reduced by 6 compared to the previous year. And over a 5-year period, we've seen a 50% reduction in RIDDOR reportable incidents, which is really positive. We're really pleased with that. In terms of injuries in the reporting year, we saw a 13% reduction, which again is a positive reduction to see. The number of physical assaults resulting in injury reduced by 57%, which again is a positive reduction. And the total number of violent incidents, which includes both physical and verbal violence, reduced by 53% as well last year. Unfortunately, we did see a slight reduction in the number of near misses being reported, which is something we are trying to encourage. But that is something we are working on this year, and we're working on various programmes and initiatives to try to encourage people to report near misses. Within the report, you'll see that slips, trips and falls continues to be the highest cause of injuries. And it is the highest cause of injuries within each department individually as well. However, in the reporting year, we did see a slight reduction in the number of slip, trips and falls compared to the previous year. There was a 42 42 number reduction. Again, last year, that was something that we were focusing on. We included lots of information on the intranet around slips and trips, and we'd focused quite a lot on that in our training courses. And again, it's something that we continue to work on this year to help reduce that figure. In terms of the wellbeing service, last year we did see that the number of referrals increased by 5%, and also the number of sessions delivered by the wellbeing service increased by 41%. Within the report as well, I've included data on the employee assistance programme, which is the external service that we use, which is purely a telephone-based counselling service. And over the year, there was a total of 122 calls made to that service. And then really just to give you a little bit of information on this year, which is slightly outside the scope of the report, but in terms of the wellbeing service, in Q1, there were 29 referrals to the service, and they actually delivered 700 appointments, which is an increase compared to the previous year. A lot of them were telephone-based appointments. However, moving into Q2 this year as well, they have been doing some face-to-face appointments and some telephone appointments, and they had 60 referrals and 533 appointments within Q2. And then really within this year as well, just to give you a bit of overview in terms of the work that we've been doing in relation to COVID, we've been heavily involved in supporting the managers with their COVID-19 risk assessments, and we've been supporting the workplace recovery programme in making sure the buildings are COVID secure. So really that's been a big focus on the work that we're doing this year, which will be reflected in next year's annual report that we'll present. That's really all I wanted to go through, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Right, I can't see any hands up anywhere. Is anyone, am I missing anybody? What I would say is it's a very comprehensive report, and it's been quite interesting reading it through. And of course, it's the first one we've had since 2015, I think. So it was certainly due, wasn't it? But look, well done, Amy, in producing this. I think this is a very valuable input for us. We now, well, we're noting it and supporting it, and of course any further action that's required to ensure the health, safety and wellbeing service continues to succeed. So,
okay, thank you.
Fine. Is there anybody else? No. Okay. No. So. Can I move the recommendation then? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Amy. That brings us down to the last paper, which is the organisational change in policy procedure, which is Anna.
Yes, over to me. Sorry, let me share my camera as well. Right, over to me. Yes, this details the number of current action plans in place at Appendix A, where the implementation of them have been completed, and there are none that have been completed that have led to compulsory redundancies. And also in Appendix B, it shows where there are action plans underway where there will be some compulsory redundancies, and the only one detailed there is for the corporate resources in the food court, where there are predicted to be 12 compulsory redundancies made.
Yeah, I mean, they're likely to be, I think, some further adjustments as a result of COVID. That's one which is the first one on the list. And we'll have to see how that all goes. But no, I think we note that report as we've done with previous ones, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yeah, it's to note. Yeah, it is.
Thank you very much for that. No other speakers. I think that concludes our meeting. Thank you all very much, and have a happy Christmas, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Happy Christmas to everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.